What's up, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Slade. Hope you all have a phenomenal and fantastic day today. So this is going to be one of two different deck techs that I specifically have been working on. The second one that I'm going to show you, I'm going to wait until the new set drops because it's probably going to get upgraded at that exact point. But once that happens and I do make the upgrades for that deck, then I will definitely show you the deck list that I have in store for you guys. Plus, I will do some gameplay footage as usual. But this deck tech, I do want to go ahead and show off while I've got it ready and set and everything. So this is a Shift Reanimate deck. It's built around a card called Uldra. So when you summon it, you play 3 units with Shift from your Void, and then you shift them. Then you can, when it dies, an Entomb ability activates, and then you can do the exact same thing over again. So when it dies, you get 3 units. When it gets summoned, you get 3 units, and you just keep bringing your stuff back. So board wipes don't affect you at all. But it's built around this one specific card. So let's go ahead and go through the entire deck list from start to finish as usual and look at everything that's going on here, kind of explain the deck, and then once that we get done with that, then we'll go and jump into some gameplay. So we've got 30 units in this deck. So the first one being Ghar. So when an enemy unit with flying is played, you silence it. So that's its natural ability. But then you can shift it for 5, and you silence each unit in the enemy player's hand. Okay. So this is really good for getting rid of pesky flyers that you don't want to have to deal with. But it also is really good about getting rid of the units in their hand that just you don't really know what they're playing at the moment, but you do know that you need to get rid of something. So that's really good for getting rid of potential threats that could be in your opponent's hand. So the next one is called Borderlands Trailcutter. 2-drop time unit. When one of your units becomes shifted, it emerges 1 turn sooner. Then you can pay 5 to draw a card, but if the card that you draw has shift, you get to play it and then shift that card. So this is really a really good draw mechanic, but then it also allows you to get extra units on board. And most of your units, when they're shifted, they do something. So this is really good for helping out in getting a better hand or just getting more units on the board. Sporefolk is one of the ones that I'm kind of testing out at the moment, so this may or may not make the cut. But Sporefolk is there so that you can get your units into your Void so that you can play spells, which we'll go over here shortly, that allow you to bring those units back shifted. So that's basically what Sporefolk is for, is just to get units into the Void, bring them back with certain spells that we're about to go over, and get the mechanic rolling. We've got a Smuggler this time instead of a Merchant. So it's not a shift unit, but it has ambush and it allows you to get a time or a shadow card. So we'll go over the market as usual once we get to it, but just this is there so that we can have a market. So Direbeast is one that I've kind of gone back and forth between. And the reason for Direbeast is because there are aggro decks that will outrace you to that you just can't do anything about. So Direbeast helps in the situation that it gives, not only has lifesteal itself, but it also gives another unit lifesteal as well. So you could potentially just swing and gain a bunch of life just by using Direbeast's ability. And it has the shift ability too, so that's also good. Unraveling Fanatic was a card that was suggested to me by a good friend of mine by the name of Death. He has been a follower on my Twitch channel for a good bit since I've started streaming Eternal, and he's been super helpful into helping me with certain deck techs that I've been working on. This was his suggestion, and quite honestly, this is probably one of the most important cards in your deck. Only because, one, it draws you extra cards. Two, it becomes insanely large really quickly. And three, you can shift it, and it can be protected to the point to where that it will stay a 1/1. Your opponent, the only way your opponent can deal with it is if he board wipes, which doesn't happen very often. But they can't target it when it's shifted. So the whole purpose of Unraveling Fanatic is to shift it from the void onto the battlefield, draw your extra cards, and then when it emerges, it becomes huge, and it's unblockable for a turn, and you have the potential to give it lifesteal and a bunch of other abilities. So anyway, that's the reason for Unraveling Fanatic. Highblood is really good about getting your board state back after being board wiped. So even if you get harsh ruled, which it will go over why harsh rule is in the deck list here in shortly, but Highblood allows you to get back ahead of the game after being board wiped. And I have won games just on Highblood and Fanatic alone. Just on these two cards by themselves, I have won straight up games just because they would board wipe, think that I couldn't do anything, and then just bring these guys back and gain my board state right back to the way I had it. So that's the reason for this. Basically to overwhelm your opponent. Okay, Nikos is super important to this deck list. I have yet to decide how many that you need for the deck, though. So this is kind of just like up in the air at the moment. I currently have 2 in this list, but I've had it to where that I've had 3. You do not want more than 3, period. You don't want more than 3. 2 is not bad, but then it's one of those cards that, like, you don't need it to win. But if you can get it out and all of your units are shifted, you could win the game just by playing this card. Like, they'll straight up scoop if you play this. But if you have more than 3, it becomes a dead draw. So you consistently get it in your hand and you can't even do anything with it. And it just becomes a hassle. So right now, it's a test between 2 to 3. So if you do decide to build this deck list, try out 2 to 3 and see which one you prefer, and whichever one you prefer, go with that. But for me right now, it's 2. It might change to 3. I don't know yet, but this is how many I've got currently. So this is just a test run is all it really is. You've already seen Uldra. It's a 3-of. It's basically the same concept as Nikos, except that the entire deck list is built around Uldra. So you want to have more Uldra than you do Nikos. So that's why Uldra is a 3-of versus a 2-of. Okay. Uldra will be one of those cards that when you have multiples in your hand, it feels like a dead draw. But it's very good about coming back and helping you out even though you have multiples in your hand. So this has higher priority than Nikos does. That's why that I say Nikos is a 2 or 3. This one could go even as far as a 4-of maybe. I haven't tried a 4-of just because I'm afraid that if I do get a 4-of that it will end up becoming a dead draw. But you do need to have more of a priority with Uldra than you do with Nikos. Just straight up, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that now. Alright, so we have one attachment. This one attachment in this deck list is a card that may or may not make the cut, kind of like Sporefolk. This one is just, for its ability, for what you're trying to do with this deck, is just really good if you can pull it off. But it can also be a dead draw at the same time. So I'll go ahead and show it to you. Cloak of Moments. Your units cost 1 less to shift When one of your units emerges from being shifted, it gets a +1/+1 counter. So this is a card that will make all of your emerge cards super cheap and super quick to play. So it's really good about helping that, but I don't know if it's good enough to make the cut. If it is good enough, you do not want to have more than 3. Like 3 is like, it's very difficult to go over 3. And honestly, I would even go down to 2. I'd probably go down to 2 of these in the main deck, if you can manage it. Just because it's not really necessary, but it helps. Okay, so right now it's a 3 of, but if you can do it as a 2 of, go for it. Do it, because it's not necessary, but it's extremely helpful if you can pull it off. Okay, so now we're going to go into the spells. So we have Remembrance. So this is one of your Reanimate spells. It's one of them. There's technically 2 of them, but one of them is in the market. So this is your main one. So you play a unit from your void with cost 3 or less. So if you notice, all of your units except for 2 are 3 or less. So Remembrance actually will allow you to reanimate Unraveling Fanatic, Highblood, Direbeast, your Smuggler, Sporefolk, the Trailcutter, or even the Master. You can reanimate any of these and they become shifted when you reanimate them. The best option for you to choose is these 2. These are your 2 main targets, followed by Direbeast. These 3 here are what you're wanting to look for. These 2 have the highest priority, followed by Direbeast. The rest of these are if you have no other choice. Okay, so you really don't want to target these cards specifically. Seek Power lets you go and get your influence. So it's a 3-color deck. You need something to go and get that 3rd color. There you go. Pretty straightforward. Reweave is a card that allows you to sacrifice a unit and then choose a different unit to put it into play shifted. So the purpose of Reweave is so that you can sacrifice, say, something like a Direbeast and go and get a Highblood. Or you can go and sack a Smuggler to go and get a Fanatic. So it's basically the same concept as Remembrance. The only difference is that it can target anything that's within that mana range. So the goal for Reweave is you actually want to use it for Uldra. So you play Uldra, you sack it with Reweave after you go and trigger off his ability to bring back your shifted units, right? You sack Uldra with Reweave, go and look for Nikos in your deck if it's still in there. Play Nikos. Nikos' ability triggers after you go and get your additional 3 from sacking. So you'll end up getting 6 units if you can get there. A total of 6. You can get 6 of these from him, sack it with Reweave, go and find Nikos, go and trigger Nikos' ability off. All of your units emerge, and it just becomes completely insane. However, you do not want to do all of that in one turn. Okay, so what you're attempting to do is play Uldra, trigger it once, wait a turn, sack it with Reweave on the next turn, trigger it again to get an additional 3, look for Nikos, then Nikos triggers off, all of your units emerge, and then there you go. Okay. There is one card that is not in this list that I'm probably going to change as I'm showing it to you, and I'll explain why. But just note that that's the combo you're trying to go for with Reweave. That's the ultimate goal is to use Uldra, sack it with Reweave, search for Nikos, emerge all of your stuff, wreck face. Okay. Banish, pretty straightforward. It's a kill spell, and it also gets rid of a pesky relic if you're going up against relics, which I do. I have seen quite a bit of them here recently. So that's what Banish is for. So Harsh Rule I mentioned before. So in this deck specifically, Harsh Rule does not do anything to you. It does not hurt you, period. Harsh Rule is actually your best friend. So if your opponent is playing a control deck and they're playing green and they're board wiping your stuff, you're pretty much just overjoyed right now. You literally just made... They just made your entire day, literally. Because the whole purpose, again, for this deck is to get all of your stuff into the void, bring them back with your reanimate spells, and then just wreck face. So, pretty straightforward. Okay, now your sigils. You have 3 time sigils, you have 2 amber waystones, 2 justice sigils, 2 shadow sigils, 2 amethyst waystone, 3 crest of progress, 4 crest of mystery, 4 seed of mystery, and 3 crest of vengeance. So most of you should know what most of those do. I've not mentioned waystones before, for those that are new. But waystones, they do certain things if you reach up to 4 influence of the same color that you play it as. So like, for example, amber waystone, if you have 4 time influence into your mana pool, then you gain 2 life. And this one, if you have 4 shadow, you gain nightfall. And a nightfall basically just means that on your opponent's turn and your turn, you draw 1 extra card, and then you take a damage for that extra card that you draw, basically, okay? But these you should already know about. Now the market, okay? So the market is very up in the air, okay? So the main cards that you need to keep in your deck, the main ones, is Wormbait, Malediction, Grasping at Shadows, and Passage of Eons. I'm probably going to take In Cold Blood out actually right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take In Cold Blood out, and I'm going to show you what card to change it for. This right here. Etched Monolith. Alright, so now we're going to go to the actual deck now. Alright. We're actually going to start with that card just because I pulled it out. So, your units have charge, which means they all have haste. Okay? Let's just be straight up. They can attack the turn that they're played. Pay 10 and sacrifice Monolith to have your health go back up to 25. So it has a 2-way standard of getting you back into the game. Alright, so we talked about how that Reweave and Uldra is your main goal. Okay? So that you can go and get Nikos. With Etched Monolith on board, all of your units now have charge and can swing immediately the moment they're emerged, and they're unblockable. So your opponents can't attack or block the units that just emerge from being shifted. It is absolutely insane. And then the fact that if you can pull off Cloak of Moments, which is the whole reason why those are in here, is that when they're emerged, they get an additional +1/+1 counter, which could straight up just help you win the game there. So Etched Monolith is like super key to this deck, but you don't want it in the main deck. You want it in the market. So you're going to play this late game when you know you're getting ready to pull off the Uldra combo, where you're going Uldra, Reweave, Nikos, emerge all of your units, swing for game. That's when you know you're getting ready for that, all right? But we'll go back up to the top now. Wormbait is basically there to sack your units, to get them in the void, to give you extra units. So it's a token producer. But your tokens are shifted, and they get bigger the more of these that are in your void. So you do want to have some units in your void to stay there. So that's why that you have stuff like Sporefolk, Borderlands Trailcutter, just anything that does not have shift for its straight up mechanic already on the card. 9 times out of 10 you're going to leave those in your void just so that you can get worm bait to become bigger, and then you sack your shifted units to get those big units out into play. That's basically what that's for. This is basically a board wipe for aggro. If they ever come out with a shadow board wipe instead of a justice board wipe, you're going to replace this with the shadow board wipe. That's all that's there for. Is if you can't get to green but you have a bunch of shadow and your opponent is playing aggro, you're going to go and search for this with Smuggler, just so that you can wipe the board and start over again. Grasping at Shadows is your last Reanimate spell. This one you go in and get when your Uldras are in the void and you need to get it out on board so that you can get your combo going, okay? So, or your mechanic going. Let me go and put it that way. So that's what the Grasping at Shadows is for. This one is to get your smaller units, which is the majority of your deck. And this one is strictly to go get Uldra. Do not use Grasping at Shadows for anything else other than Uldra, okay? So that is why that's in the market. We already talked about Monolith. Passage of Eons silences all enemy units and kills all enemy attachments. This is for those pesky relic decks or those weapon decks that will outrace you every time. That's what that's there for. It gets rid of all of that. Because it ends up that relics will actually kill you, which is kind of weird. But relics are your worst enemy. And then weapon decks, so stuff like Rakano weapons or anything like that, those are also your worst enemy, because they go in and just not only swing at your units, but they make their units bigger. They make it to where that you just can't get your stuff off because you can't attack them and you don't have any units on board and you can't bring them back and all this other stuff. So that's what that's for, okay? But that's the deck list, guys. Hopefully, if you do try it out, let me know how you like it, what changes you made, if you made any. I would greatly appreciate any comments that you have about this deck list. But also, if you have the time, please hit that little thumbs up button, subscribe, all that good jazz. Help me grow this channel and make it into something that is bigger than what I anticipated it to be. But yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoy it. And now I am going to go get ready to show you guys the gameplay for this deck. Hope you enjoy that video as well. See you in the next one. Peace out. Have a great rest of your evening.
Grenade launcher. Okay. Okay, cool. Oh, is that what you sent me?
Yeah, I posted the auto grenade launcher, but I've already gotten rid of it because nobody wanted it.
Just gotta know how to sail, man. Know how to sail.